Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Ray Marquina, aka the official Arcaneer, and in today's video, we're diving into how you can effectively orchestrate parallel loads of dimensions and fact tables using nested pipelines within Microsoft's Fabric Data Factory. Whether you're building a modern data warehouse or managing lakehouse architecture, loading multiple tables can quickly become a bottleneck if they're not handled properly. By leveraging nested loops and child pipelines, we can break down and manage complex workflows, triggering loads by table type, handling dependencies, and maximizing parallelism. This approach not only improves performance, but also gives you a modular, reusable pipeline design that scales as your data platform grows. So let's take a look at how that works. So in front of you, I have open my Fabric Data Warehouse database, and I want us to take a look at the way that we've structured, or the way that I've structured the tables, the stored procedures, and our control table. We're going to start with the control table. So I'm going to click on the ellipses here and just select the top 100 rows. This is a very scaled down version in order to demonstrate what nested loops are going to have, or what I need in my nested loops control table. Your control table might have many more columns, but again, the design itself shouldn't really change. So I have ID, the table name, and the stored procedure that I want executed in this control table. But the important factor that I'm going to need for my child loop is defining a table type. And that's going to be whether this is going to be a dimension or whether this is going to be a fact. So keep that in mind, and that'll become more obvious of why we use it when we get into our child pipeline. We are going to have a customer table that is just going to contain basic customer information, again, very scaled down, and we are going to have a fact table. Let me show you what each of those stored procedures really looks like. So if we click on the load dim customer, you're going to see that it's doing nothing more than an insert of a couple records into the dimension itself. Now, ordinarily, this will be something like a select statement that you're doing transformations on or aggregations towards. In this case, my goal is just to get you something that looks like a customer dimension. The way that we get to it is really irrelevant for this demonstration. And the other thing that I want to make note of is in the fact table, I do have dependencies on my dimensions to be loaded because they are going to join up to each of the, they are going to join up to the fact table as I insert records, right? So it means that if I'm looking at how I've inserted record one, right, I'm joining to my date, I'm joining to my customer, I'm joining to my product in order to make up these rows. So there is a dependency, and that is traditionally the way that it works, right? You do want to process your dimensions first, and then you're going to want to process your facts. And there is going to be that dependency. Now, you could do something in your design where you have like a key store, or you are able to persist an ID that would allow you to run in parallel, but we're not going to go that advanced today. Today, we're just going to talk about let's process our dimensions and then let's process our facts, but let's process them in parallel after the dimensions have run, and then and then as the facts runs, we also want to run those in parallel. So that's really what we're going to try to do today. And what this stored procedure is really saying is I have a dependency on dimensions to run first, but it doesn't stop me from being able to run my facts in parallel once dimensions have also run in parallel for that first time. So now that we have a good baseline of what this looks like, I think we can go over to our workspace and we can start creating our pipelines. So let me go back to my workspace. I'm going to go into my pipelines folder, and I'm going to create a brand new item. And we're going to start by creating our child pipeline first, and we'll create our outer loop. So let's go ahead and call this inner loop, and we'll put pipeline in front of it. All right, so as that's getting created, we can start that process of what that's going to look like. So the first thing that we're going to want to bring in is a lookup activity. And this lookup activity is going to connect to my Fabric DW. So I believe I have already a connection string here for it, or a connection, I should say. And we're going to want to type in a query here of looking up the values from our control table. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so let's go ahead and write this. This is going to be select all from control table, and it is case sensitive. We'll say where table type, again, this is where the table type comes in place, is equal to, and we're going to want to pass in a parameter value of our value filter. So let me go ahead and click OK here. And let's go ahead and add our parameter. And we're going to call this value filter. And it's going to be of type string, I believe. Let me double check to see if that is correct. Yep, it's going to be of string. And now let's go back over here and let's bring in that value. Now, this does have to be in single quotes. So what I'm going to do is use a little bit of string interpolation to make that happen. And I can remove the select statement here, and then I can wrap it around quotes here. Let me see if that will work the way I'm expecting it to work. So we'll click OK. And then I'm going to put a default value here of dim. So hopefully this will return to me all the dimensions that I have within my control table. So we'll give this a run and see. We'll click OK. And we're going to see what gets returned to us in the result set, or in the output here. All right, we can see that it's now in progress, working its way through. And it succeeded. And if I look at my output, we can see that we get one row back, which is good. We get the dim customer. And that is because I have first row only selected. I want everything, so I'm going to deselect that. Let's run it again and see that we can get our full list. I think there's either 3 or 4 in here. And hopefully this should run a little bit faster now that it's waking up here. All right, so we can see that it's queued and it's processing. We should be able to get our results set just to make sure that we can see everything as it's happening in real time here. All right, it has succeeded. And now we can see that we have 3. We have all of our dimensions that we're looking to process in parallel. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over a for each activity, and I'm going to connect it. And in here, I'm going to pass in my my lookup, right? So we can select this one, and it has to be dot value. So now we're saying I want these values to be passed in an array into my for each. And what we're going to want to bring in to actually execute is that stored procedure, right? So let's go ahead and bring in the stored procedure activity. And let's go ahead and wire this up to the proper data warehouse database. And in here is where we can not use the actual stored procedure name, but actually add dynamic content. So here we can add dynamic content to add in our item. So this will be item dot, let's see what I actually named it. So if I go back here and I go to my control table, we can see that it's called stored proc name. So that's the item that I want to call. So let's go back here and say item dot stored procedure. So that should now run in. That should now run for every dimension that I have passed in. I'm going to remove the default value just to illustrate that I don't need it. This is what we're going to pass into our child or our outer pipeline. And that's going to be it for our inner pipeline. So we're going to save it. And that looks good. So let's go back to our workspace. And now what we can do is we can start on our outer loop. So let me go back to pipelines, and we'll call this PL outer loop. And this is going to be responsible for the execution of our dims and facts so that they can run in parallel, but so that the dimensions can run first. So let me go ahead and create a brand new activity. And this is going to be another lookup. Excuse me, not a lookup. We're going to, in this case, want to set a variable that's going to allow us to pass in an array. So ordinarily, you use a lookup here. In this case, I'm just going to create a variable in order to act as the values that are going to feed in here. All right, so we're going to need to create a few variables in order to make this, in order to let this work. So let's go ahead and do that first. So we'll create two new variables. I'll call this list items and their values. Now the values that I'm going to want to set here are going to be my dims and facts. Again, this is what I need to align to what I have in my control table as the table type. So this is going to be a table type that I am allowing the outer loop to execute. So I'm going to say that this is my dim table type and this is my fact table type. These are the two that I'm looking for processing. Let me make sure that that is a comma. And when you're doing an array, they have to be in double quotes. And then we need to change the type to array. All right, so now that those variable values are set, let me go to the variable and actually set this up properly. So we're going to say that we want the name of the list items as this, and then we're going to want to pass in the values of those variables. So let me go in here and say that these are going to be my values that I want. Let's go ahead and run this. And again, we should get dim and fact really returned to us to ensure that this is working. Now, the reason, again, this had to be in an array is because when you look at the for each activity, it's going to take a format of arrays as it does its processing. So yep, here you can see my list. I have my dim, and then I have my fact. So now that we have our variable set, let's go ahead and bring in our for each activity. And now that we have our for each activity, we can set up our settings. And the only thing that we're going to pass in here are going to be our values from our parameters, or I'm sorry, our variables. So again, this is going to contain dim and fact. So what I'm saying is I want these values to be processed for each item. And the other thing that's important is the outer loop needs to be executed sequentially. So what that means is my outer loop is first going to process my dimensions first, and then it's going to process my facts. Now, this is important because remember, it's the child activity that's going to process the dimensions in parallel, not my outer loop. So what my outer loop is allowing me to do is keep that dependency order of having the dimensions run first, and then the child activity or the child pipeline is going to allow those to run concurrently or in parallel. And then after we're done with our dimensions, then it's going to go over to the next value in the array, which is facts. And then the child pipeline is going to allow those to run in parallel as well. So very important concept to understand here. And this is really what's going to allow us to be able to process the dims and facts with those dependencies in place, but also able to have the parallel processing there at the same time. Okay, so in my inside of my for each, I'm going to call an invoke pipeline, and that's going to be my inner loop pipeline. So I'm going to establish a connection. And then the pipeline that I'm going to call is my inner loop pipeline. Looks like I have a couple here. So let me do, I think I did it without the underscore here. And now what we're going to need to pass in are the items for that value filter that need to come through. So I'm going to come in here, and this is going to be my for each item that we're going to pass in. So this is going to say, again, where my parameter is looking for in my control table, whether it's going to be dim or fact. And this is what's going to allow that filter to take place so that we can process each in parallel. And then we're going to wait for completion, right? Because we don't want these to run one after another. We want them to wait for this to be done processing DIMs, and then we can process facts. So that's also important to have here. And then that's it. Now you have an orchestration that's going to allow you to go end to end to process your dimensions and your facts in parallel, but still maintaining that dependency. So let me go ahead and go back home and let's save. And let's run this thing. Let's see how this works. Let me go back to my query here. And what I'm going to do first is, just to illustrate that this is working properly, is I'm going to run my script here to truncate all my tables so that everything is empty. And now, just to prove that everything is empty, let's go ahead and run a couple of select statements. And let's see that everything is truly no longer populated. All right, so let me go ahead and run this. So we can see our customer dimension is empty. And if I look at result 2, we'll see that my fact sales is also empty. So let's go ahead and go back to our outer loop. And let's go ahead and click run. With a little bit of luck, we'll be able to see what's happening here. Okay, so we'll be able to see that my set variables has listed the DIMs and facts that it needs. And for my invoke pipeline, see if this just shows anything. Yep, we can see that the first item in the array that it's processing is my dimensions. And if I click within the output, if we give it a couple seconds, this will become populated, so we can kind of see and take a look inside to see what's happening. So let's wait for that to clear as it's executing, so we can kind of see that those dimensions are indeed running. So we'll just give it another second here as it warms up. Typically, I've seen that this takes about a minute to run, even though they're small. I think there's a little bit of processing that happens inside of the invoke pipeline that doesn't make it as quick as it would ordinarily be. Oh, the other thing I should mention is you cannot put a for loop inside of a for loop. So the reason that I have an invoke pipeline is because there is a constraint. So if I tried to put in a for loop inside of this, this for each, another for each, it would throw an error saying that I can't do that. The way that we get around it is by using an invoke pipeline. All right, so now that that's finished, let's take a look at the output and let's see what's happened here. So if I take a look, as this opens up, we can kind of see that it has run my stored procedures, and each of these has taken 12 seconds. So I know that this is run in parallel. And we can see that, through the input, that it ran the date, it ran the product, and it ran the customer all in parallel. And now what it's doing, if I go back to my monitoring hub here, one of the things that Fabric does is, as it seems to lose its place, but looks like it just opened up a new tab here. Now, if I go back to my invoke pipeline, we'll see that now it's running my fact, right? So I'm able to keep the sequencing of that dependency that I want in place without having to compromise running parallel processing. So I'm able to run not only my dimensions in parallel, I am now able to run my facts in parallel after the fact. So we're going to give it another minute to finish. Looks like it was successful. And if we look at the output, yeah, it does open up a new tab for you. We're able to see, and again, this is only one fact table, but if I had multiple, again, it would process in parallel because my for each is not constrained by running in batch or in sequence. We can see that it was able to successfully run my fact sales, showing me that it kept the dependency. But the real test is to see whether or not I have data loaded in my fact table. So once upon a time, these were empty. I'm going to select both of these to run them. And we can see that we now have customer data. And we now have fact data with the proper keys in place because, again, we were able to keep that dependency in place, even though we're now running each of these in parallel. And that's how you can harness the power of nested loops and child pipelines in Fabric Data Factory to streamline your ETL processes. By organizing your dimensions and fact loads into modular parallel workflows, you're not only improving performance, you're building a future-ready architecture that's easy to maintain and scale. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and drop a comment if you want to see more Fabric tutorials or have a specific use case you'd like me to cover. Thank you so much for watching, and we're going to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.